In the heart of the forest, where silence speaks louder than words and the weight of loss hangs heavy in the air, one man's solitude was shattered by a small, fragile creature who would teach him the true meaning of survival, love, and letting go. For the first time in years, Elias felt something stir within him, a spark of hope he thought had long since been extinguished. But the wilderness has a way of claiming what it loves, and what it gives, it can just as easily take away. Elias had always believed that the world in which he had once thrived, full of crowded streets and never-ending noise, had become a forgotten memory. Here, in the heart of British Columbia, surrounded by towering fir trees and the muffled hush of snowfall, he had found a peace that no human could offer. His cabin, small but sturdy, sat nestled between two mountain ranges, shielded from the wind and prying eyes. It had been years since he retired as a wildlife biologist, seeking solace in the woods after the death of his wife Margaret. They had both shared a love for nature, a love that Elias couldn't bring himself to indulge in after her passing. She had always dreamed of living among the wild, of coexisting with the creatures of the forest. It had been a dream they had put off until later, but now, that later was gone. For 3 years, Elias had lived alone. He had no family left, no children, no relatives, no friends who could understand. In those 3 years, the forests had become his only family, the animals his only companions. One evening, just as the sun dipped below the horizon and the amber light flickered across the snow-dusted ground, Elias was walking back to his cabin when he noticed something odd. A movement near the edge of the trees. At first he thought it was a deer, a wolf perhaps, but the shape was too small, too fragile. Curiosity tugged at him. As he drew closer, he stopped dead in his tracks. Lying in the snow, trembling and weak, was a small black bear cub. Elias's heart skipped a beat. His mind raced. He had seen cubs before, but none like this. She was alone. Her mother, he assumed, had met a tragic end. Perhaps the cub had wandered away, too weak to survive without her. Elias didn't need to wonder about the rest. He knew. The poachers were near. Without a second thought, he rushed over to the cub. Its small, frightened eyes stared up at him, the tiny chest rising and falling erratically. He knelt beside the cub, careful not to make sudden moves. His years of experience with animals guided his hands as he gently scooped the cub into his arms. Her fur was thick, but the cold had already taken its toll. She wasn't going to survive another night in the wild. Elias could see that. "Easy, little one," he murmured softly, carrying the fragile creature back to his cabin. For the first few days, Elias wasn't sure if the cub would make it. She wouldn't eat, and every time he approached her, she flinched, her eyes filled with the terror of an animal who had known too much pain. Elias gave her space, waiting patiently for the trust he knew would take time. His only job now was to be there, to watch, and to protect. At night, he would sleep on the couch in front of the fire, just to keep an eye on her. It wasn't long before she began to trust him enough to fall asleep on the floor next to him. Her breathing, shallow and weak at first, became more regular, more relaxed. Gradually, she started eating berries, meat scraps, anything he could find to tempt her. Her tiny paws would swipe at his fingers as she dug into the food, and Elias couldn't help but smile. She was a fighter. He began to name her, though he didn't speak the name aloud. Nova. A new beginning, a symbol of hope in the face of tragedy. As the days passed, the cub grew stronger. She began to explore the cabin, poking her head into drawers, pulling at the hem of his worn-out shirts, curious about everything. She would occasionally wander outside, but always returned to the safety of the cabin. Elias let her go. He knew she needed to learn the ways of the forest, but he also knew that for now she needed him. Winter came, blanketing the forest in white, and the pair settled into a rhythm. Elias had long since stopped questioning his decision to care for the cub. It felt right. It felt like life had returned to him in a way he hadn't expected. Nova's presence filled the silence of the cabin. Sometimes she would curl up on the couch with him, her body enormous next to his but still small in comparison to what she would one day become. Other times, she would playfully chase her own shadow or sit on the windowsill, staring out at the swirling snow as if deep in thought. But one thing was constant: the bond between them. It was unspoken, primal, a connection built on survival but also on something deeper, something beyond words. It was early fall when Elias first noticed the change. Nova, who had grown into a healthy though still young bear, began acting differently. She spent more time outside exploring the woods farther than ever before. Elias would sometimes spot her at the edge of the trees, standing still, her gaze fixed on the mountains in the distance. It was as if she was waiting for something, as if she could feel the pull of the wild calling to her. At first, Elias tried to ignore it. After all, she was just a bear. A part of him, though, knew that this wasn't just about hunger or curiosity. She had started to change, and he wasn't sure if he was ready to let her go. He began to see her less and less in the cabin. Instead, he would find signs of her wandering in the woods, broken branches, paw prints in the dirt. He wondered if she would ever return, or if she was learning to survive on her own. She had grown strong, and in a way, he was proud of her. But another part of him felt a familiar ache, one he had tried to bury for years. One evening, when the sun dipped low behind the mountains, Nova came to him. She sat at the door of the cabin, her eyes meeting his in a quiet, almost knowing way. Elias could hear the wind whispering outside, and in that moment, he knew. It was time. The following morning, Nova was gone. Elias had expected it, but it still hurt. The forest was silent save for the occasional crack of ice beneath his boots. He walked to the edge of the trees, his heart heavy, his chest tight with emotion. He stood there for a long while, staring into the wilderness. The world felt vast, overwhelming. Nova had come into his life like a spark, a fleeting presence that had lit up his days. But now she was returning to where she belonged, to the wild. The thought of it filled him with both sorrow and relief. She was free. She was strong. She was whole again. A week passed. Elias returned to his daily routine, chopping wood, mending fences, tending to the fire. But something was different. There was a quiet absence in the cabin. Nova's presence had left a void that couldn't be filled. But Elias never searched for her. He didn't need to. He knew she would be fine. The wild had claimed her, and in a way, it had claimed him too. The circle was complete. Years passed, and the seasons turned. The forest remained as it always had been, timeless, enduring. Elias had aged, his hair now silvered, his steps slower. But the cabin was still there, tucked away in the woods, a reminder of everything he had once known. One cold winter's night, as snow fell thick and heavy against the windows, Elias felt a strange warmth in his heart. The fire crackled and the wind howled outside, but inside he felt at peace. There had been whispers from the locals, rumors of a large black bear seen near the cabin. They didn't know who it was, but Elias did. It was Nova. She had returned, perhaps to say goodbye, perhaps just to remind him that she had not forgotten. The next morning, when Elias did not wake, they found him in his bed, peacefully asleep. as if he had simply drifted away in his sleep. And as the villagers buried him beneath a tall fir tree, they swore they saw a great shadow move among the trees. A black bear, with eyes that glinted with the memory of something sacred watching from a distance. Thank you so much for joining us on this journey through the heart of the forest and the bond between man and bear. If you felt the emotions of Elias and Nova's story, don't forget to hit that like button. It really helps us reach more hearts like yours. And if you want to see more stories that inspire, move, and connect, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss a video. Stay tuned for our next adventure and we'll see you in the next one. Until then, remember, the wild is always waiting for you.